Welcome to Season 2 of Dialogika, a podcast between two friends about the latest in politics, society, and feminism in Indonesia and the world.
I'm Sweden Lee.
And I'm Stephanie Tangkilisan.
After a longer than expected break,
Sorry!
We are finally back and ready to go with a whole new season of episodes.
This week, we're going to share a few life updates and what you can all expect in future episodes, such as new music, interviews, conversation, and more.
We're also going to give a brief, not so brief, recap of what's been going on in Indonesia while we were both on break. So, without further ado,
here's to it!
And we're back.
We didn't disappear, actually, forever.
Only just for a few months, you know?
Longer than intended, clearly. But as you probably, if you listen to our last few episodes, know that Sweden and I moved across the continents to the US. Between moving and immigration stuff and just like settling into our respective new places, apartments, and things, we've just been really super busy and not all there together. Like, I'm sitting in a dark closet with all of my suitcases still. So clearly not at my most ordered self yet, but I'm getting there. But yeah, we're actually back and still as eager as ever to talk about Indonesian politics and society and issues that, you know, concern our beloved country.
Mm-hmm.
So probably with this episode, you already noticed all new music that we have selected with a lot of feedback from some of you guys. Some of you guys really hated our music, and we take that criticism to mind. And so there you have this new set of music. We're also lining up some really cool interviews in the next few weeks and the next few months. Since we're out of the country, we're going to try to do more interviews with people in Indonesia doing really cool things.
Mm-hmm.
There are some cool journalists that I follow and followed me back, or like cool Indonesianist professors I follow on Twitter, and because I have cool friends who are actually cool Twitter people, then sometimes they retweet my stuff. I gain some garner of legitimacy somehow. So follow me on Twitter at StephTime.
#humblebrag.
Plug. Oh my god.
Stephanie's like got a handle on this Twitter thing much better than I can.
Other life updates. I'm starting school at Columbia School of Journalism in a few days. So
how is it like in New York?
I've actually haven't spent that much time in New York between going to Yellowstone and the Tetons, which is really interesting, right? Because I was mostly in rural America last week, like Idaho. I went to Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana. And there were like Trump posters and like banners and stuff. So like I didn't, like, nothing bad happened to me.
Of course not.
But like, and everyone was really nice and super friendly and everything. There was also traveling with Anna, who's white. I don't know if that has to do with anything, but like, I just don't know who's like that Trump supporter. Like, are they like secretly racist? I have no idea. And like, I feel like coming back to America this time is like an entirely different experience for me. Like, when I left Chicago, I was like, you know, very optimistic. Barack Obama was still president, you know? Like, I just felt like America was this really warm, welcoming place where nothing racist really happened to me. And then like, this time around, I'm just like, like, when is this racism thing gonna happen? Like,
you kind of felt like you have to prepare yourself in case something happens, right?
Like, yeah, I have to prepare myself mentally. Racism is real and alive and kicking in America.
I mean, this is kind of like the situation we're in, and I don't know if you found it surprising when you got here, just like how ridiculous it is sometimes being in this country.
I was just taken aback by my reaction, you know? Like, I felt like, oh, am I being prejudiced here? Or like, am I thinking too poorly of people? But I saw like a guy wearing a Make America Great Again hat, like in downtown Manhattan, downtown New York. So, yeah, you never know.
Not sarcastically, too.
Not I don't think so. He was like wearing a proper blazer and like khakis. Like, I don't think this was meant ironically.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but I don't have hot water. Did you know that? Random life update. I don't have hot water.
I assume that's the next thing that you need to update. You have internet. You have Wi-Fi. That's pretty great.
I have internet. Yeah, I installed my own Wi-Fi. I got that Easy Connect box and was like, I don't want to pay $50 for some dude to install my Wi-Fi. I'm an independent woman who needs no router guy. And I installed everything myself. I was really proud. And it's really interesting. I'm on T-Mobile, right? And the quota that I get is less than what I get in Indo, supposedly, but it's been getting me through the month way longer.
Maybe you just have better phone habits. Cheaper phone habits.
I mean, I'll use it outside of my house. I don't watch YouTube videos on the go. I listen to podcasts on the subway and stuff. I don't know if you can hear it, but you can kind of hear the subway from here, from where I'm sitting. I can hear it.
You need to buy the latest issue of the New Yorker because the cover is just the MTA on fire.
Oh yeah, I was gone for that whole week where the MTA was on fire. I picked a really good time for being gone from New York.
It was the MTA is on fire. The city is on fire because of the heat waves. It's just nobody wants to be there.
My super has been really great, so he's helped me out with installing my AC. He's gonna help me install my curtains tomorrow.
Oh, you got an actual responsive landlord.
Yeah, he's been great. Frank, shout out to Frank.
Shout out to Frank for making Steph's life easier.
Yeah.
You know what?
Ah!
What was that?
Sorry, the pipe just the pipe just buzzed and sitting right next to the pipe. I was surprised.
Listeners, this is the life of a podcaster right here. You gotta find any nook and cranny in your apartment to record, and Steph's right next to a plumbing pipe. Podcasting life, it's so glamorous, guys. Get into this.
I know.
So enough about us. What's been going on in Indonesia, Stephanie?
So I guess the biggest summer blockbuster has to be Balada Cinta Rizieq, or the love trials of Habib Rizieq, the leader of the Front Pembela Islam, or Islamic Defenders Front, who is responsible for rallying the radical Islamic forces against Ahok, the previous governor of Jakarta.
Who's now in jail because of these actions by the FPI. And I would say the FPI, the Islamic Defenders Front, is probably the most high-profile radical
vigilante group there is currently. They rallied around 2 million people against Ahok.
They're still very active, even though Ahok is already in jail.
Yeah, and so basically with Habib Rizieq, he's currently under fire for running the law against Undang-Undang Pornography, or the Pornography Act, because he sexted a woman who is not his wife, and there's naked pictures of her, and the dirty chats are revolting. So he's currently in Saudi Arabia evading trial because of this act, which is interesting because now he can't really organize as well against Jokowi. So there's a lot of political motivations surrounding, his charges, trying to weaken him and this movement.
But he's still a fairly influential, even in his absence, right?
Oh yeah,
so he's been on the run now for a few months,
Welcome to New York.
The police sirens are chiming in on this conversation. And maybe they're hunting for Habib Rizieq in New York right now. But yeah, he's been on the run for a few months now. I remember when I was still back in Indonesia, he was already a suspect. The case was growing against him, and he was nowhere to be found. I remember the police was always delivering these letters telling him to come to the police office, and he's never there. I wonder where he is.
Yeah, basically, I think FPI was founded in 1999, but they've been very active in the last few years and seriously posing a threat beyond, just occasional Ramadan raids, in which they bully restaurant owners who are still selling food on holy month of Ramadan. But yeah, it's actually posing a serious challenge to the government. So another thing that the government has tried to do is, earlier this year, was to close the HTI, or Hizb ut-Tahrir Indonesia, which is an
Islamic group that originally came from East Jerusalem in 1953. And their overall ideology is trying to create a Sharia state in all the countries they operate in. It's like an international organization. They're everywhere. And, Australia, Bangladesh, Denmark, Indonesia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Malaysia, Netherlands, Pakistan, Sweden, and the US. So they're everywhere in the world. And the difference between them and the FPI is that whereas the FPI wants to take their street justice and, acts of vigilantism in order to their efforts, Hizb ut-Tahrir is their dialed down respectability politics, whose main efforts concentrate on finding government officials, converting them, and then slowly trying to implement legislative change to create a more Sharia state.
They're more about the networks and working within the system rather than just like fighting, trying to overthrow the system, right?
Yep. And they're pan-Islamist. So basically that means that they want to create like a Islamic state across the world and throughout borders that doesn't recognize national boundaries. So the Hati, because of this ideology, they operate in more than 40 countries, but they're actually banned in many Muslim majority countries, including Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. And the reason why a lot of other Muslim countries are, comfortable in banning them is that this pan-Islamist ideology, right? So it tries to erode the sovereignty of the state, which is why Jokowi and the various ministers are saying that the Hati can be banned because they don't agree with Pancasila, which is, the idea of Indonesian state sovereignty. So that nationalist grounds that they're trying to ban Hati without any legal due process, without any actions, which is why a lot of journalists and activists are worried that this is creating a bad precedent for other rights groups.
From what I've heard, there's a lot of backlash against Jokowi's proposed banning from both the left and the right, because as you said, the right might be concerned about Jokowi banning a right-wing group, right? But the left are concerned about this overreach of power, where the president can just say, if you don't agree with Pancasila, we're just gonna stop all your activities and cease existence.
So as of we're recording this, the status of the Hati has already been banned. So on in mid-July, Jokowi signed a law changing how organizations can be banned without due process. So currently Hati is on paper no more.
And this is the government in the sense the administration, right? This is not even if the parliament have opposition towards this, Jokowi issued a presidential decree. So it's an extra legal course of action right now.
Yeah. Before, I think you were supposed to go through a judicial process to determine whether or not this organization really is against the law. And so the problem with this is that Hati, even though ideologically we don't agree with them, it's just scary to think that the government can choose to ban in 7 days whatever organization it deems to be contrary to its values. So what if, the president is no longer Jokowi and and the next president decides that, LGBTQ organizations are against the Pancasila. And I think more worrying is for activists who are trying to defend Papua or other separatist type states who are, very much at risk, right? So Fabiana Firdaus, a friend of mine and a journalist, wrote for Time about police brutality and violence in Papua. So, for example, Indonesian police arrested more than 3,900 peaceful protesters in the region last year alone, which means that a lot of peaceful protesters who are trying to get human rights violations unearthed in Papua can be pretty much disbanded, because even though they're peaceful protesters trying to fight for human rights, they can say, they want to have a separatist Papua state. So it just puts groups that are already at the margin at risk. And that's where I'm scared. I'm not so much scared for maybe the general other human rights organizers, but I'm definitely terrified on behalf of Papuans and pretty much most outlying areas in Indonesia, because, Indonesia, since 1969, since we pretty much forced that region to be under Indonesia, has led to more than 500,000 Papuans been killed. So it's just...
we're more worried about its implications towards the future rather than about Hati or really the current use of the law. But it sets a precedent, right? Like, we don't want it to set a legal precedent or extra legal precedent in this case.
So another major thing that's happening within Indonesian politics is various attempts to weaken the Corruption Eradication Commission, or KPK, the anti-corruption force that is very much trusted and loved by Indonesians. So against one of its lead investigators, Novel Baswedan, there was an acid attack that happened to him.
It was a heinous acid attack.
Earlier this summer, and caused him to lose an eyeball, I think. And so initially, the police forces arrested around 4 suspects, but then released them. And then it's been going on for the last few months, and nothing has, pretty much no new action on his case. So Novel and a lot of people came from being, really optimistic about bringing this act to justice to horrified about the lack of progress that's been done on this case. Because there are CCTV cameras of this acid attack. So they're like, why can't you find this person?
It's a little bit tricky, right? Because to provide a little bit more context to who Novel was and why he was targeted, not only was he a chief investigator for the KPK, the case he was investigating at that time was around the electronic KTP, or identity cards case, where there was like a black market for people to buy and sell ID cards to influence elections, etc., etc.
And just a lot of parliament members were supposedly misappropriating funds and, giving special vendors contracts in return for money, basically. And it's a big case that's linked, like the previous Speaker of the House, Setia Novanto, and his party, and a lot of other figures. And Novel Baswedan was also a police officer who was investigating police.
Yeah, the national police is also implicated in this case. So we've got...
Yeah, so Novel gave an interview that said basically that some police officer was involved in his acid attack. So that's another scandal, right? So in addition to the attack on Novel as a person and as an investigator, there are attempts by the DPR, or the parliament currently, to weaken as an organization the KPK itself, by saying that there needs to be an oversight committee, and there needs to be attempts to curtail its power. They can't wiretap, they can't do all of these different things, because supposedly the KPK needs overseeing by the DPR that's they are currently investigating.
Part of the success of the KPK over the last few years is its ability to target
high-profile individuals.
Exactly. Like, they are supposed to be neutral in the sense, like, they're not supposed to be controlled that easily by parliament.
And the thing is, like, the parliament already has some control of the KPK. They're saying that, Fahri Hamzah, the current Speaker of the House, said that, any government organization needs to have oversight. And it's like, the way KPK elects its commissioners, its main investigator, is through Komisi 3, or one of the DPR commissions that, appoints these people. Like, they have to vote to elect the shortlist that the president gives for them to be KPK. So they already have that kind of oversight. So this is, I think, another attempt to weaken Jokowi's power. Leading up to 2019, you'll see all these different news items that seems to be, big, but not related to Jokowi, but in a roundabout way, if you understand Indonesian politics, has to do with the presidential elections in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I mean, I've already read reports of people jockeying for political alliances, positions, trying to slowly move their way towards creating an opposition towards Jokowi. And I think Jokowi knows it, and he's trying to be smart and strategic about what he's doing right now.
But that's why it's tying it all together. That's why Jokowi is so bent on, and the people, the police, everybody else on his side are bent to, for example, closing down HTI and, acting against Rizieq, because, these are forces that are trying to challenge him being reelected in 2019.
And not only that, right, like, challenge the ideas of democracy and pluralism. I think in the past 2 years, we've already seen how right-wing extremist groups or any kind of extremist groups can easily latch on towards national concerns about economic anxiety, social anxiety, and ride their way up to the top. And that's a dangerous, dangerous threat towards democracy. And I think Jokowi sees that threat and he wants to nip it in the bud before it gets closer to 2019, because when it's already an election season, that's going to be the hardest time to do anything, right? Like, people are going to be all about voting for the opposition, or, voting with their hearts rather than their heads.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be interesting to see how Jokowi proceeds in the next 2 years as we get ever so closer to 2019, and how other groups and political parties interact with him. So I guess that's what's been happening in Indonesia while we're out. If you like this kind of summary, please let us know. And we'll
do more of them more often, because this is fun to do.
So as we're entering our second season and we've taken advantage of this longer than expected break, I actually listened to our previous episode and it said we're going to be gone for a few weeks. That turned into a few months, so sorry about that. Might have enjoyed it a little bit too much. It's been a really good break, honestly, for Stephanie and I. I think it gave us a chance to not only take a break and sort of like rejuvenate our mental selves.
Because, we're doing this just the two of us. We don't have people helping us. And we have full-time jobs and other side hustles.
As part of our efforts in, making season 2 of a higher quality and making sure we keep ourselves connected to what's happening in Indonesia, we'd like to introduce one of our volunteers, Sebastian Hadinata, who reached out to us over the summer and is going to help us out
through Facebook. So you can do that, guys.
It was such a pleasant, out of the blue surprise, and we're really excited to have him give his help and give his thoughts about what we're doing. So welcome on board, Sebastian.
We've really loved doing this, and we hope you guys enjoy the second season and continue listening and giving us more interaction.
I think we've connected with a lot of different communities via this podcast, which is super cool. And seeing there's a really strong, community in Indonesia concerned about these issues, cutting across politics, society and feminism. And it's really exciting to meet these people and hear about their stories and share them to other listeners. And we hope to continue doing that in our new episodes upcoming.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. You can find more information and resources of whatever we talked about on our website, dialogika.id.
Music credits to John Dealey, Lee Roosevelt, and of course, Broke for Free.
If you like what you hear and want to support us, please review our podcast on the Apple Podcast app or whatever app you use to listen to your podcast. And please share our podcast with your friends. It's the best way to spread the word about Dialogika.
If you want to get more involved, we'd love to hear from you. Our email is dialogikapodcast@gmail.com, or just shoot us a message on our Facebook page.
You can also find us on Instagram, YouTube, SoundCloud, and now Twitter. Please follow us in these various platforms. Our Twitter handle is @dialogikapod. Also, follow me on Twitter. It's Steph Tank. That's STEPHTANGK.
Thank you again, and see you guys